Let's talk about running backs that you should start or sit in week 10 of the fantasy football season. We have the Bengals, Cowboys, Chiefs, and Titans on bye. So no Chase Brown, Javonte Williams, Kareem Hunt Pacheco, Tajay Spears, Tony Pollard. But in today's video, we're going to go through every single matchup. You'll have my rankings for every single running back. So we're going to help set your lineups today. Let's jump into Thursday Night Football, where we have the Raiders at the Broncos, a 42.5 point over under. Spread is 9.5 points in favor of the Broncos. That is tied with one other matchup for the largest spread of the week. So Vegas does anticipate a big game from the Denver Broncos and not so much from our Las Vegas Raiders here. However, Ashton Jeanty is a safe and sound player at this point, purely because of the volume that he's seeing. Even when they're down in games, they're going to target him in the air. We saw that last week. Ashton Jeanty out there every snap except for 6 with Raheem Mostert getting a target in there. But 13 carries, 5 targets through the air. That's perfect. That's the kind of floor we want for an Ashton Jeanty. Obviously, he got into the end zone with that receiving touchdown, almost 20 PPR points. You're going to hope for a similar outcome in this game. If the Raiders are down, you're going to hope that obviously they continue to target one Ashton Jeanty. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, it is a good matchup for our Denver Bronco running backs. This is the 11th best matchup for your running backs in fantasy football. J.K. Dobbins, he is still consistently getting that 15 or more touches type of range, but we are starting to see R.J. Harvey really eat into the workload a little bit. 20 snaps for Harvey last week compared to just 29 for J.K. Dobbins. Of course, Dobbins was still heavily utilized when he was in the game, 16 total touches compared to just 7 for R.J. Harvey. At any moment, I do think we could see R.J. Harvey get more and more involved. The only issue with this backfield is Tyler Bidet is making things really confusing. He's out there 14 snaps. He keeps getting used on third downs and pass catching scenarios. It's really frustrating that Sean Payton is doing that. However, Dobbins is a must start for me in this matchup against the Raiders. High over under, largest spread of the week. I think he's a very safe play. I do envision him getting back into the end zone. Obviously anything's possible. And RJ Harvey is, there are worse desperation plays, right? He's a low end RB3 this week, a flex option, but he consistently is being used with those big plays out of the backfield. And that's exciting in a Sean Payton offense. Okay. We do have an international game this week. It's in Berlin. All right, the Falcons at the Colts. 48.5 point over under, a very high over under for an international game. The Colts are favored by 6.5 points. So it's technically at Colts, but it's in Berlin. Let's start with Bijan Robinson. Has had a couple disappointing performances here in the last couple weeks, but of course you're not going to sit the guy. I mean, for a stretch there, he was averaging over 150 all-purpose yards per game. It doesn't matter if the Falcons are up, they'll use him. If they're down, they'll use him through the air. He is I know that hasn't felt like it, but he's really a game script proof running back. And as far as Jonathan Taylor goes, of course you're going to play him. Again, both of these guys, it doesn't matter what their matchup is. It doesn't matter what they've done in the past couple weeks. They're always going into your lineup. So this game is very simple. And one thing I will say is if you've got a Bijan or a Jonathan Taylor, start to think about what their handcuff might be as you're heading into the playoffs. These guys are so important to your lineups. Okay, let's go to the start of the first Sunday slate. We've got the Saints at the Panthers in this one. 39.5 point over under, so a very low over under. The Panthers are favored by 5.5 points. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. The Saints are probably the worst team in the NFL. And quite frankly, I just don't think you can throw Alvin Kamara into your lineups anymore. I don't think you can. Honestly, this might be the moment you and we recognize that Alvin Kamara at one point was such a historically great superstar. I mean, we all remember the 6 touchdown game on Christmas. It's not happening again, guys. You're not going to see that version of Alvin Kamara. Both schematically with Kellen Moore, they don't feature him in the passing game, in the run game either at this point. When they're down in games, they don't feature him in the air. When they're up in games, they don't feature him on the ground. And quite frankly, he doesn't look like the same player. I know this as someone who had Alvin Kamara in the Flock League all the way up until this week. He is just not the same player anymore. It's unfortunate, but it is the reality. He doesn't have the same juice. He doesn't have the same explosiveness, big playability. It's just not there. Devin Neal is being used as well. You can see in this last game, Devin Neal had 16 snaps compared to 24 for Alvin Kamara. Neal with 4 touches, Kamara with 9. It's just they're using him in between the tackles. They're not getting him in space. 98% of you guys watching this will have a better option this week than Alvin Kamara, and it's not even a good matchup against the Panthers. Their defense is really tough. On the opposite side, this is where I have good news in this matchup. Rico Dowdle is an absolute superstar. I mean, the guy has turned into an absolute dog, and there's no way you can sit him. Last week, he took over this backfield thoroughly. 42 snaps compared to just 13 for Chuba Hubbard, 28 total touches. Rico Dowdle is the engine of this offense. He well and truly is the engine of this offense. I mean, if you look at it purely, based off of the type of usage these guys got, you'll see Rico Dowdle is that dark green. It's just dominant on early downs and goal line and short yardage. And he's even out there on third downs. He is a superstar running back in fantasy football. He is. He's a top 12 ranked guy for me rest of the year. He's my RB7 this week. He's in your lineup. I don't care how small your league is. Let's move on to the Giants at the Bears. 48.5 point over under. The Bears are favored by 3.5 points. Honestly, leading into last week, I really felt like Tyrone Tracy was going to come in and, really dominate this backfield, or at minimum be like the 60 to 40% share ownership in this backfield. That was not the case last week in New York, right? Devin Singletary actually out-snapped Tyrone Tracy 32 to 25. Devin ended up with 10 total touches, Tracy with 9. It was the definition of a complete split backfield, and there was no value on either side of this. Now, here's what's tough. It's a really good matchup. The Bears are the 8th best matchup for your fantasy running backs, so there could be some value here. But honestly, if I had to choose one, it would still be Tyrone Tracy, but he's also a risky play, just like Devin Singletary. So these are very low floor plays. You're hoping one of these guys gets into the end zone. It is a good offense with Jackson Dart under center, but even he steals, touchdowns on the goal line. I'd be hesitant with both of those names, to be honest with you guys. But with the Bears, if DeAndre Swift starts, he's an absolute locked and loaded must-start player. The Giants are the 4th best matchup for your fantasy running back. They're also the favorites in this game. We should see the Bears establishing the run in the second half. Now, if DeAndre Swift doesn't play, then go ahead and swap that ranking for Kyle Monangai. I have no problem, just like we said last week, with Kyle Monangai being the starter for the Bears. He would be a top 15 play for me if that were to be the case. All right, let's go to the Jags at the Texans. 38.5 point over under. So a low over under in this game. Vegas does not anticipate many fantasy points coming from this one. Jags, you can start Travis Etienne. There was concern, even from myself, that maybe we were going to see a bigger role for Bashul Tutin coming out of the bye week last week. That did not happen. In fact, LaKent Allen played more snaps than Bashul Tutin, but Travis Etienne still the dominant guy there, had 27 total touches. And I know his yards per carry wasn't high. He ended up with 16.5 points, but he looked good. He honestly looked good in the role that they placed him in. So he is going to be the only must start in this matchup. If you need to start someone with the Texans backfield, it will still be Woody Marks for me, just because of the passing attack, how he gets involved. He is still leading this team in snap share as well. 35 snaps compared to 26 for Nick Chubb. What's really annoying about Woody Marks is he's such a good pass catching back, but they're using Dare Gumbawale again. That's what's really, really, sucking that upside out of both of these names. But if you're going to start one of them, it is going to be Woody Marks for me. It should be a competitive game with or without CJ Stroud. But of course, I would prefer not to start any Texan running backs. Okay, let's go to the Bills at the Dolphins. 49.5 point over under, one of the highest of the weeks. This is one of those other matchups that's tied for the largest spread of the week in favor of the Bills. They're heading to Miami. If you got the Bills defense in fantasy football this week, should be a lights out performance from them. James Cook, of course you're going to start him. The Dolphins are the 7th best matchup for your running back. And then on the opposite side, it doesn't really matter what the matchup is for Devon Achane. He's always going straight into your lineup. He's been such a good pick in fantasy football. I dread thinking about it daily that in the Flock League, I chose my beloved Bucky Irving over him. But of course, injuries really killed Bucky's season so far. Okay, let's go to the Ravens at the Vikings. So in this game, we have a 47.5 point over under. That's a great total there. We've got a 4.5 point spread in favor of the Ravens. Even though they're in Minnesota, Vegas is thinking this team is playing with desperation, as in the Baltimore Ravens. I do believe Derrick Henry is a great start this week. Yes, it's not the best matchup against the Vikings. Their defense is actually pretty decent, but the Ravens are favorites. Lamar Jackson's back. Derrick Henry looked great last week, despite not getting into the end zone. He looks like his dynamic, downhill train runner. I think he's right back into that form. On the opposite side of this, If Aaron Jones is healthy, I prefer to start Aaron Jones. It's a great matchup. The Ravens are the 5th best matchup for your running backs. Of course, a lot of that had to do with the fact that Lamar Jackson was missing time and teams could run on this defense, but still not the best defense. So Aaron Jones is definitely in play. I do not trust Jordan Mason. I would prefer for you not to play him if Aaron Jones is out there. However, if Jones is out, Jordan Mason then becomes a must start because I just believe most of the work would funnel through him. Before we jump into the next matchup, I got to tell you guys about a completely free feature on the Flock Fantasy site. You can get it by using the promo code LAND and creating a free account. There's no money involved, right? But it's the My Teams feature, which lets you see expert consensus opinion on your entire league, your team, and see where you rank, see recent trades. One of the awesome free features on the site. So check that out in the pinned comment if you want to have a secret weapon that a lot of your league probably doesn't. Okay, let's go to the Browns at the Jets. This is the lowest over-under of the week. Okay, so the lowest over-under of the week in this matchup. Here's the bad news for the New York Jets. Number one, Breece Hall wanted to be traded. He came out and his representation said that he wasn't traded. It's a little bit of an awkward week now that he's coming back into the building. We thought maybe Isaiah Davis would take over this backfield. That's not the case. Breece Hall is still in New York, even though apparently the Chiefs had a deal for a 4th-round pick on the table. That would have been fun for fantasy football. But not only is it going to be awkward vibes, you don't know who's starting at quarterback, and the Browns are the worst matchup for your fantasy running backs. Regardless, Breece Hall has to be in your lineup, just how dynamic he is. This offense is built around the run game, so I'm going to put Breece Hall in there, even though it's a bad matchup, and hope for the best. Now, on the opposite side of the ball, we do believe Quinshon Judkins is going to be healthy enough for this game. All reports say that so far. So if he's playing, you're going to start him. This team just moved Quentin Williams, by the way, and Sauce Gardner, 2 of their best players, not only defensively, but on the team point blank period. So this defense is probably going to suffer on Sunday. Look for Judkins to take advantage of that. Now, here's what I'll say. If Judkins isn't able to play for some reason with the shoulder, Dylan Sampson then becomes a pretty decent spot start. I certainly would play him in the Flock League with my options that I have. I'd probably play him over the likes of like a Woody Marks if there's no Quinshon Judkins, but that's just a volume play and because of how he's used in the air. Okay, moving on to the Patriots at the Buccaneers. This should be a very exciting game, very high over-under. A lot of fantasy points expected in this. Should be a close game. Both the Pats and the Bucs have very good records, good starts to the year so far. It was cool to see the Patriots finally feature Travion Henderson last week without Ramondre Stevenson. Henderson ended up with 51 out of 68 snaps. He had 19 total opportunities, including 5 targets through the air. Now, Terrell Jennings still had a role. He had 12 total touches. He ended up getting into the end zone, obviously, with that rushing touchdown. Was from about 20 yards out. But Henderson looked fine. He looked a little bit explosive in the open field. I love it when they use him through the air. So assuming there's no Ramondre Stevenson, you can play Henderson with some confidence as a spot start, low-end RB2. However, if Stevenson is active, then Ramondre Stevenson becomes that start, and Henderson becomes a much riskier play just because before the injury to Stevenson, they were putting him out there about 70+% of the snaps. On the opposite side of the ball, oh my God, I don't have information on Bucky Irving at the time of recording this, but I need something good to happen for my fantasy football team. I need Bucky Irving to be out there. Okay, so we are placing our rankings today as if he's going to play because we're speaking with confidence, even though we have no idea. But we're going to play both the scenarios. Here's the good news. Even if Bucky isn't out there, if it's Rachaad White, well, they've opened the practice window for one of their better tackles, Luke Gadecki. So hopefully he's able to play in this game. Either way, help is coming for this offensive line. So if Bucky Irving is healthy, please, I need this. If he's healthy, he's my RB9 this week, a must start. And then Rachaad White becomes a spot start because of his work in the air. However, if Bucky's out, which is a possibility, then Rachaad White would be the must start again. He's the starting running back in a really good offense. Either way, I don't really trust Sean Tucker. Let's go to the Cardinals at the Seahawks here. 45.5 point over under. The Seahawks are favored by a pretty hefty 6.5 points. Now, there's not really a clear start here, honestly, on either side of this ball. Bam Knight, Amari DiMercado, they very much split the work on Monday Night Football against the Cowboys, which is what this team said they were going to do. You can see Bam Knight had 38 snaps. Amari DiMercato had 27. However, when DiMercato was out there, they trusted him with more of the opportunities. 15 touches compared to 11 for Bam Knight. Neither of them had a really good fantasy day against a really good matchup in the Dallas Cowboys defense. Neither had over 9 fantasy points. It was gross. It was a good matchup, and it didn't work out. So now they face the Seahawks, which is one of the more difficult rushing defenses in the NFL. And that defensive line is no joke. I would be very cautious to start any Cardinals running back. Now, if Trey Benson is active, you'll have some more clarity, and I believe he would be the number one guy. But he still is a low-end, RB2, high-end RB3 at best, because the matchup is just not good against the Seahawks defense. Now, on that opposite side with the Seahawks, every week you have no idea which Seahawks running back they're going to prefer. And I just don't see that changing at any point this year. So, yes, you can start Ken Walker if you prefer him. He does more with his touches than Zach Charbonnet does. He had more of the snaps, but every time the Seahawks touched the ball last week, they scored. They faced the Cardinals defense, which should be better. Walker had more touches last week. Who knows what happens this week? In previous weeks, it's been Charbonnet. They've given Charbonnet goal line opportunities. In this game, last week, they gave Walker goal line opportunities. It's a Russian roulette scenario, okay? Sure, you can start them because they're on a good offense, but each week, these guys could bust for you. That's the reality of this offense. Okay, let's go to the Rams at the 49ers. Highest over-under of the week at 50.5 points. The Rams are favored by 3.5 points. This one's fairly simple, honestly. You start Kyren Williams, you start Christian McCaffrey, and you don't think twice about them. They're going into your lineups. I know it's simple, but high over-under, close spread. These guys should both be involved. It was cool to see Blake Corum get more work in that Rams offense on Sunday. Now, to be fair, they completely destroyed the Saints, so they had an opportunity to feature Corum a little bit more. But Blake Corum was out there, 13 rushing attempts, 25 for Kyren Williams. But I think that had more to do with the fact that it was just a blowout. All right, Lions at Commanders. This would have been an exciting game if the Commanders could stay healthy. But, yeah, Lions are 8.5-point favorites, even though it's in Washington. At this point, I don't think you can trust a Commanders running back. And, you just can't. Without a healthy Jaden Daniels, without a healthy defense or a competent defense in Washington, this team is going to be constantly down in games with no hope to come back. And I'm saying that as a Commanders fan. We're terrible. We're ass. That's just the reality. We are a terrible team. The offense is going to be bad. Okay? It's not going to be fun watching Marcus Mariota lead this offense. And they're probably going to keep rotating Bill Krosky-Merritt and Chris Rodriguez now that Jaden Daniels is out. McNichols could have a role. If you had to play one, it would still be JCM, but it's a terrible matchup, a terrible offense. They're going to be down in the games. So you'd have to hope that Bill Krosky gets a rushing touchdown in the first half. I just don't see how this is not a blowout. And because I'm saying that, it does make both Gibbs and Montgomery great starts. I would be shocked if both of these guys don't pay off this week. The Commanders are bad. And I think you're going to see the Lions run the ball a lot in that game. Okay, let's go to Sunday Night Football. We've got the Steelers at the Chargers, 45.5-point over-under. The Chargers are favored by about 3 points. Jaylen Warren has been fantastic for fantasy football. He actually had one of his better days of the year on Sunday. We saw Jaylen Warren on Sunday end up with 16.9 points. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. Now, I say one of his better days for fantasy. It wasn't a great day on the ground. He had 31 rushing yards on 16 attempts. So it's not like he was fantastic on the ground. That Colts defense was actually pretty stifling. But they finally used him on the goal line, which we hadn't seen much this year. You're going to start him again against the Chargers this week on Sunday Night Football. And I know Kamani Vidal was bad last week. We can all agree, it wasn't a good performance for Kamani Vidal. The Tennessee Titans defense really showed up, but he was still by far their preferred running back. He had 47 snaps. The next closest was Patterson with 18. He only had 12 carries. That's definitely frustrating. I hear where you guys are coming from, but still, a starting running back attached to a great offense, you got to put Vidal into your lineups unless you have a clear, better option. As we're jumping into week 10, I am setting a brand new DFS lineup. In week 8, I won this contest on FastDraft, the Quick 6 Super Slam. I want to get first again. Now you can create your own lineup simply by downloading the FastDraft app, using my promo code LAND. I'll match your deposit up to $50, and then you'll get my week 10 rankings completely free. But it's very simple. All you got to do is choose 6 non-quarterbacks, get unique with it, have fun, and you can check that out in the pinned comment if you want to submit your own lineup. Okay, moving on to Monday Night Football. Eagles at Packers should be a very exciting matchup. 44.5 point over under. The spread is 2.5 points in favor of Green Bay. That's probably because they're at home. It is in Green Bay. And this is another matchup that's fairly simple. I mean, yeah, it might be boring to hear, but I'm not stupid either. I'm going to tell you to start Saquon Barkley and start Josh Jacobs. Like, we don't have to make this difficult. Here's the good news for Josh Jacobs. The Eagles defense, it sounds scary, but on the ground, people have been able to run against the Eagles this year. I mean, it's been actually fairly simple compared to previous years. So Josh Jacobs has plenty of upside this week. It'll be good to get Saquon Barkley back after the bye week. Now, if for whatever reason Saquon Barkley does miss time, then Tank Bigsby is going to be the name that you can consider starting. Although I wouldn't be shocked if the Eagles end up going with a committee if there's no Saquon with that groin injury. But I appreciate you guys watching the video. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you found any value in the video, subscribe as well, and I'll see you guys in the next one. We've got wide receivers coming out in just a couple hours. Nothing but love. Draft with me every night this week on the FastDraft app, where there are thousands of dollars to be won weekly. Getting started is easy. Download the FastDraft app, use the promo code LAND at signup to get your deposit match up to $50. That's up to 10 free entries on us. And when you finish your first DFS contest, I'll send you my weekly rankings completely free. Check out the link in the pinned comment to start drafting today.